on the occasion of Krista's beautiful exhibition Solos on view through February 19th on the second floor of DePaul Art Museum. And Kate Sears-Butowski, Director of Programming at Expo Chicago, which celebrates its 10th anniversary this edition, April 13th through 16th, 2023. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to this event, which Krista and I have been in conversation about since she did a panel during this last iteration of Expo on visual poetry. I'm very excited that it's finally happening. On Collaboration is presented as part of Expo Chicago's Regional Dialogues, which offers panel discussions, conversations, and provocative artistic discourse with leading artists, curators, designers, and arts professionals on the current issues that engage them. And this conversation will be available to watch digitally on our website following the conversation. I would like to thank DePaul Art Museum, in addition to DePaul Center for Black Diaspora, and our partner Pigment Magazine for including this event in our Black Fine Art Month programming. Held each October, Black Fine Art Month is a global celebration of Black fine art, an annual recognition of artists, innovators, collectors, curators, and those invested in Black art, and an opportunity to commemorate and elevate these contributions through programming that highlights artists, art collectors, curators, gallerists, educators, and others. Black Fine Art Month is an initiative of Pigment International, was founded in 2019, and has been entered into the Congressional Record by Congresswoman Robin Kelly. Moderating today's conversation will be Ionit Behar, Associate Curator of DePaul Art Museum and curator of Krista's current exhibition. Ionit also co-founded and is co-director of Behar Shackman, a curatorial duo who is curating an upcoming large-scale public art project at O'Hare International Airport with 17 Chicago-based artists. Previously, Ionit was the curator of collections and exhibitions at Spartus Institute Chicago, research assistant for the exhibition Helio Jessica to organize Delirium at the Art Institute of Chicago, and a graduate curatorial assistant at Gallery 400, University of Illinois. Her writing has appeared in exhibition catalogs and art journals such as Field, a journal of socially engaged art criticism, the Chicago Reader, The Scene, and The Exhibitionist. Please join me in welcoming Ionit, who will introduce Krista and Cauleen.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you, Expo for being such an incredible partner in this program. Thank you, Pigment International and DePaul Center for Black Diaspora for your support. And thank you all for joining us today. After introducing our speakers this afternoon, there will be a conversation, and then we will have a brief Q&A at the end. After the program, we invite you all to see Krista's exhibition, which is right outside this room. While working on Solos with Krista, planning the public programs became as important as the exhibition. Each program would reveal a different side of Krista, a different moment of her life and work. Like Krista said, these programs are an opportunity to open up a new side of herself to the public. From a conversation with Adrienne Marie Brown about their collaborations and relationships, to sharing a book launch with Tricia Hersey, to today engaging in a conversation with Cauleen Smith, who has collaborated with Krista on multiple occasions, but today is the really first time they are sitting together publicly and sharing their experiences together. Before I present Krista and Cauleen more formally, I just want to say that, Cauleen, you're such a big part of Chicago scene, and we're so lucky to have you and Krista here in person, as I'm sure everyone here agrees.
Yes.
Now let me introduce you to our speakers. Krista Franklin is a writer, performer, and visual artist, the author of Too Much Midnight by Haymarket Books, the artist book Under the Knife, and the chapbook Study of Love and Black Body. She is a recipient of the Helen and Tim Mayer Foundation for the Arts Achievement Award and the Joan Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant. Her visual art has been exhibited at the DePaul Art Museum, Poetry Foundation, Kunst Hall, Ruth Ward Gallery, Museum of Contemporary Photography, Studio Museum in Harlem, Chicago Cultural Center, National Museum of Mexican Art, and the site of 20th Century Fox Empire. She She is published in poetry, Black Camera, The Offing, Vinyl, and a number of anthologies and artist books. Cauleen Smith was raised in Sacramento, California, and lives in Los Angeles. Drawing from structuralism, third world cinema, and science fiction, she makes things that deploy the tactics of activism in service of ecstatic social space and contemplation. Smith enjoys container gardening, likes cats, and collects vinyl records. Also rocks. She is art program faculty at California Institute of the Arts, BA in Creative Arts from San Francisco State University, and MFA, University of California, Los Angeles School of Theater, Film, and Television. She had solo exhibitions at the Whitney Museum of American Art, SF MoMA, Mass MoCA, and most recently, LACMA. She has received multiple awards, and I will name them right now. But like multiple awards, yes. Please join me in welcoming Krista and Cauleen.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah.
Should I start with a quick question?
I guess you can. Sure, why not?
And then I'll let you
Kick it off.
On the theme of collaboration, because I would love to hear from each one of you, how do you define collaboration? What is collaboration for each one of you? And how does it take shape on your work?
Let me start? Okay. So collaboration. Collaboration is really a big part of the show. You know, it's solos, even the title itself is, evocative of like, musicians doing a solo inside of an ensemble, So I was really thinking a lot about how I play with others. I think about just artwork as really playing with other people, And mainly my friends, who I have a deep respect for. I think that that's a real big part of collaboration for me, is that, when we talk about this a little bit, one-on-one, but I really feel like, collaboration, people are like, oh, let me collaborate with you, and it's like, we don't have a relationship. Like, why, I don't even know anything about you, I don't know your work, like, how are we supposed to play together, right? So it's really, for me, about relationship building, and about exploring ideas together. And, solos is really me kind of showing my hand and very, just revealing that part of my practice, that a lot of my practice is in play with other people, responding to other poets, responding to other artists, and I think that's it.
Yeah, I want to answer the question, but I want to talk about the show. Because I just saw it, I'm so excited, and you covered everything in that answer, in the sense that I think of collaboration very much as a conversation, always with people that you really want to talk to. So you think of it as play, I think of it as talk. It's kind of the same thing, like this idea of an exchange or energy making between, right? And the living room in installation, that for me is like a capsule that points to a lot of things. And one of those things is the sound, which is a soundtrack created with Damon Locke.
Yes.
The wallpaper, which is like the room, the rap room created with Stephen Phillips.
Yes.
And two artists of Chicago who are just sort of like central to like myself, my own making, my own practice. They're central, like, you know what I mean?
I do.
And then I noticed, I don't know if anybody noticed this, but like every single book in the living room has a cover on it, which is a Krista Franklin collage. So all of the books are Krista Franklin book covers. There's like 30 of them. And that's also that's also a kind of conversation. And so you have a quote. Okay, here's a question.
Okay.
This is me, Graham.
Okay.
I'm just like gushing.
Just go. Let's just go.
I love it.
I hope you guys will be like emphatic, listeners as well. Like, don't feel like you have to be silent. I hate silent.
Jump in.
Please don't be silent. I will be so annoyed.
But this was literally my first chance to even talk to Chris on the show, so that was the dash. But so what I was thinking about is like this that beautiful quote where it says you were trying to make something cool enough for a record album, but in fact you do make work that is cool enough for all the books, and that's a different kind of like conversation right there with your peers and colleagues, poets and writers. And that is that's present in the show, in the books, but it's present to me in the show in terms of like the way in which the collages are read. So I was wondering if you could talk about this relationship for you between the writing practice and the visual practice and the way it's visible, like legible even to you in the work.
Yeah, it's hard for me to talk about it in some ways because I feel like the writing practice and the art practice have always been segregated to me, in my mind. When it comes to playing with other poets, that's easy work for me. That's quick work because they give me their books. You know what I mean? Like I have the opportunity to read, some of their poems, or read some whatever it is that they want me to, illustrate in advance before anybody else. I love that. I love to have that like insider background look into something, and to be talking to them really directly about, okay, well, what are you seeing? What's the images that are in your head around the cover? I mean, I'm not necessarily going to replicate it, but I do like to know what they're thinking about. Particularly like in palette. Palette is big for me. Like, I'll ask them, what colors are you seeing?
Wow, I didn't realize that you were making them for the writers.
A lot of them were
were
commissioned pieces for the books.
Yeah, that's extremely generous because I can easily imagine you just like going your shit and be like, that one, you can have it.
I've gotten that way now. I've gotten that way now. Yeah, just because I want to direct my energy into my pursuits, visually, and not so much all the time with somebody else's vision of what they want, But, when I first got started, it was Tahima Jess who asked me to do the cover of Lead Belly, his first book. And it was an interesting process because I still think that people get confused about design and art, and I'm not a designer. I do not design, and I think that especially when you have a publishing company, when things start to get a little tricky in here, and I have to be very kind of explicit, and implicit about like, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to send you, and the rest of it is up to you. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's a hard one.
I've experienced that.
And that came up with Tahima's book. That was like the first, and that was my intro.
So that was a lesson.
It was a big lesson. It changed the whole game, in some ways. I mean, after he did it, then it was like a lot of the Kavekano family, that I know, jumped in and was like, will you make my book cover?
See, that's the thing is like the conversation with the artists amongst artists and the mediation between these apparatuses that we all have to work through is so tricky sometimes. So back to the living room and this domestic space. What's so interesting to me about the show, like walking through it, is how a lot of your work just sort of remains feral, like it's not even framed, and it's like nailed to the wall or tacked, temporary, and therefore it could move. And I'm really interested in that as a decision. I mean, there's a lot of ways that I could read it, but I don't want to presume, but to me, it's like that wall that is just all of the feral works, and then that other very big work that you actually had to go and fuss with because it was acting out.
Yes.
Like I'm really interested in that like the making a paper and then refusing to sort of like protect it to let it just exist, and what you're thinking around that, and
I love that you call them feral. They are so damn feral. That I'm gonna start referring to them that from here forward. I feel like, it's about the texture for me, and so I feel like when you put it behind glass, it does protect it for sure. But, it also blocks the viewer from a kind of visual engagement that I want them to have, I also lean into this idea of my work, which still troubles me even to this day, of temporality, that everything is temporary, that nothing lasts forever, that as much as we are transfixed with the idea of foreverness, nothing, not even us, right, will be here forever, right? I mean, the most forever I can get from my work are the digital reproductions of it, which, is great, I love it, Sometimes I love the digital reproduction more than I even like the piece, like the scan of it. Or
what do you think that translation does for you?
I don't know, I see it better. I don't know why that is, but I do see it. But like sometimes I'll even look at a collage that I'm making or a book that I'm making, and I'll have to look at it through my camera phone to actually see what it's doing. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. I just feel like everything is very temporary. So why pretend like this is gonna last forever? It's just not. And also, it's paper. It's more. That's my main medium. You know what I mean? Like my medium is paper on purpose as a writer and a visual artist, right? So it's like it's going to tear. It's going. You know, Yoni was so funny. Like in the studio, just like. You know, it's a wreck. It's like things are on top of everything, you know, like I'm stepping on stuff, you know. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, huh? What's going on? I just want to step on this and it's in the way. You know what I mean? I don't know. So it's going to be damaged in some way. You know what I mean? And that's okay. I mean, sometimes it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was hoping you were going to talk about, the temporality.
Yeah, it's very temporary.
Yeah, because there's something about the domestic space that makes me think about a kind of corporeal presence that makes me then think almost like of a memento mori. Like some of these things are so absolutely precious, and just like the holding or the keeping or the living with them needs a certain kind of attentiveness and care, and even still, you would have to like let them go at some point, which I think is really profound, and I love that about that.
I do too, but it also is very heartbreaking. You know, for me too. You know, there is a side of it for me that where I get them feelings hurt. You know what I mean?
When they break down.
Yeah, when they break down and when they change, you know, 'cause sometimes they change, you know, the light will change them, you know what I mean? They change, they shift, they're shape-shifting. They're feral. They do what they want to do. I have to lean into that. I have to be okay with it, you know? They're not permanent.
So, I'm trying to figure out how to talk about language.
Yeah.
And how it appears in the collages and in the work. One of my favorite pieces that I covet, and I'm really annoyed that it belongs to someone else, is As Above, So Below. And the way that you lean into it and you see the so below.
Yeah.
And this is sort of like this key that unlocks the piece, right? And that happens a lot, but in that piece, I had the experience of like, it just really brought me in and pulled me out at the same time. And so, like, as a poet, do you find yourself like restraining the way you use language in the visual work, or do you find it just creeping in? Is it something that you're strategizing?
I bury messages inside of the work. Yeah. Usually they're really hateful. Really mean shit in there. So I like, typically I'll write something in script on the page first, or on the page, and then collage over it or paint over it.
So they're like little spells.
So you can see stuff. Sometimes you can read, little glimpses of them and be like, wow, like she's totally like cursing.
No wonder they're on
Yeah, they're like totally vibratory because there is like embedded messages underneath all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But then I also think about, especially handwriting, as like script or like as a painter or drawing,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean, like a drawing practice.
Yeah.
It is a drawing practice. Like the alphabet to me is just, simply a system of symbols, right? Like they only make sense because we know what they mean. But really, when you just have the alphabet on the table, it's abstract, so it's like, you can do whatever you want with it. And then when you have script in your hand in it, then it is kind of like, it is a spell, it is an incantation, it is, there's a lot of things that's happening inside of it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you're channeling certain things and you're channeling messages, and so it's not always important to me that people know exactly what the message is. I'm not very intrigued by, even when people ask me, like, what does this mean? Like, I hate that process. Like, what is this to you? And I'm like, I don't want to do that with you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What is it to you? And I usually turn it around though. Like, what is it to you? Like, what do you see? Because I don't want to talk about what I mean. I probably wasn't thinking about anything. So, 9 times out of 10, I really wasn't thinking about anything. I was just like thinking about making an image of something.
I don't know if that's
know?
true, Krista, but I'm not gonna everybody did. So then this is the first time I've seen so much of your work together, and I've always noticed this, but now, and also even then there's the feather. So the way in which you often are cutting so that you're splicing together a human and an animal, like very, very often, or like a natural element of nature and flesh. It physically spliced together into your collage, then often then embedded into more fibers. And I don't know, it was like a real reckoning in seeing this tactic over and over again here.
Yeah.
And you've been doing this for a really long time.
A long time.
This splicing together of the natural and the human.
Yeah.
Which is like another way of saying the natural and the unnatural.
Totally.
Right?
Or the synthetic and the organic and the synthetic. Like I'm totally playing around with the organic and the synthetic a lot of times. You know, I'm like doing a dance between like what is natural, what is unnatural, what is natural, what is supernatural. You know, really walking those lines, jumping those lines. You know, I think that the hybridization of the animal and human thing came in with Octavia Butler. She put that in my brain. She
So
put
like-
that in my brain so deep
Like
that
the
I,
mind,
oh my God.
Doro,
Yeah, like
when
wow,
she ate the dolphin and then
oh
she's
my
like, I'm
God.
never gonna eat dolphin again.
Listen,
That's so
because I've been a dolphin, right,
That's
exactly, so like I was a dolphin for
Right.
years, right, exactly.
Totally, yeah,
Yeah.
that messed me up too.
Yeah, I mean, it just like tricked my brain out, you know,
Right.
after that I was just like obsessed with this idea of like the combination of those beings, but also, those are our cousins.
Those were our relatives.
Yeah, man, those, you know, people like to think about themselves in a real hierarchical way. I'm like, you a mammal. Don't start tripping up in this bitch. Like, somebody pushes you to the edge, you're gonna come out animal. You know what I mean? You're gonna be beastly in here. You know what I mean? So, I think that's our relatives.
Absolutely.
You know, like, I have dog friends, I have some cat friends. Cats aren't really your friend. They own you.
Cats like you.
Yeah, they're
They
like
like
humans. They're like you on my level.
Oh yeah, if
They
not,
don't really, or
Actually,
I'm
no.
superior
yeah,
to
we
you.
exist to serve.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they would get that. That's why I don't really play with them too terribly much, but there are some that I like. You know, but I definitely think that navigating the natural, unnatural is totally important.
Yeah, it's just like,
It's totally important.
I mean, it's fun to hear you talk about it in this playful way, but it's also very much about a different polemic. It's very much about a way of thinking through blackness and the figure, and taking away some of the signifiers that are kind of like that pin us down, and
Yes.
replacing them with other signifiers that suggest possibilities.
Yeah.
And you've been doing that for so long that I kind of took it for granted. And then I started to notice like the kind of contemporary art dialogue catching up to that. This is an idea that you've been like actually putting into practice visually, that now is just part of like the sort of like ubiquitous discourse.
It is.
You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it is.
And that's really interesting to me, because I think that also comes very much, like you said, out of like the books that we grew up reading.
Absolutely.
And in the same way that it's Octavia Butler may have like messed with your mind or my mind.
Yeah.
And Octavia Butler's only just now kind of being read by
Yep.
all the people who should have been maybe reading her all along, right?
Yeah.
So,
Real late, party to the
I
party.
didn't mean that.
I'm gonna say it.
I wasn't
I'm
trying
gonna,
to throw
you
shit,
don't
I was
have
just
to,
saying
I'll
like,
do it. Because that's another thing, I just don't, latecomers.
I mean, I'm late to almost everything.
I'm late to stuff, but also catch up though, real
So
quick,
people are
crash course.
getting caught up, and
Yeah.
the discourse is leading this way, and it's a very different way of talking about a relationship between humans and animals than sort of like the ecological
Yeah.
discourse, or the
Yeah.
what do you call it, the people who like to protect the trees and the birds and the
Yeah.
like the people who have a very specific focus, like the whales, you know what I mean, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's a way of like having a kind of like a dominion over, even it still like continues a relationship of dominion.
Up and high up.
Right, and so then that doesn't necessarily shift our relationship
No.
with those things.
It does not.
So like the second you start to understand yourself, I guess, as a mammal, and think about what like a real like genealogical, physiological, spiritual even like relation of what that looks like, which I can see in your collages, it just shifts everything. I think it actually suggests a different way to do something as opposed to just a way to talk about something.
Yeah. Thanks, Frank. Can we talk a little bit about, I want to talk about like literature in both of our practices.
Okay.
You know, like I really want to talk to you about how literature, how books are also, because it's very transparent in your work. You know, I mean, literal transparency. I mean, like, how, you know, what is that relationship for you between what you read and how you process what you read into these visual forms? You know, how do you propel it? What's that process like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really, dependent is not really the right word, like kind of shaped and formed through what I can access through the written word. And now I'm a little bit busy, so it's like audio books, but same idea really is that like, I'm kind of voracious about trying to hear what other people are writing about or how they make things. Like, how do you make things with language? So let's say I'm reading Italo Calvino, right? And I'm like, I don't even understand what he just did in that short story. Like, I have to reread it and reread it because it's like a kind of shape, and I'm like really learning. I'm trying to learn from that so I can like do it maybe in another form. I'm really dependent on these particular voices, and it shifts over time. Like, who is important, what is important, you know what I mean? Like, I'm now back into this crazy Alice Walker jag after not paying attention for 20, 25 years, right? You know what I mean?
I do.
And I was like, what took so long
Temple
to
of my
revisit?
familiar, baby. Temple of my familiar.
Oh, can I tell you a story? I actually, so you know when she bought her land in Mendocino?
Yes.
I was a PA on a shoot, a documentary about her, and it was a little hierarchical, so the PAs were not allowed to go indoors. She's like, you can hang out down there. Down there was this little cottage that was the cottage in the book, and the creek, and the tree that was in the book.
Wow.
And I was like, you actually sent us into your book. I just was like,
She sent you
living
into the book.
out.
She sent you into the
That's where she
literal
wrote it.
translation.
That,
of the book.
and then it was like 99 degrees. It was really miserable. I was just like
Wow.
covered in dust and dirt and blissed out. I was like, this is where she wrote that book. It was so cool. Sorry for that digression.
No, I
but
love that digression.
you would
Thank you for that
loved it.
story. I would have flipped out. I wouldn't even come upstairs. I
Right. But anyway, but so I think of these things as like the world making
Yeah.
that happens in literature is a particular kind of spatial experience in your mind, right? And I'm always interested in how that translates.
The imaginary.
Yeah, and I'm
How the
also,
imaginary transforms.
yeah.
Yeah.
And as I grow older, I realize how I've been imprinted by things that I forgot.
Like what?
Oh, this is a boring story, but I was just asked to speak about a film theorist, right? Amos Vogel. And I was like, I better read this man's book. I haven't read it since I was 20 years old. That's
Right.
35 years ago. So I better read this book before I say anything.
Refresh your
I
mind.
crack it open, and I'm like, oops, I've been repeating his words. Like, I've just been quoting him shamelessly since I was 20. And because I was 20, and I didn't even understand what it meant to sort of like, to attribute your knowledge to others. Like, yeah. So that's, I mean, I feel like I internalize like these things
Yeah.
really, really deeply.
Yeah, I do that with stuff too. I think a lot of people do. Like you just hear something you ingested and then you think it's your idea.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I'm trying
it
not
happens. I'm very, very strive not to do that anymore. I think it's normal, but I do think that we have to do better, you know, particularly when we're talking about you know, marginalized people or writers who, you know, who are not known that well. You know, like how are you forwarding their work? You know what I mean?
But also like whole entire philosophies, because back to this idea of the way in which you splice human and animal or flesh or organic or inorganic.
Yeah.
Another discourse that is really, really flourishing right now is sort of like indigenous practices, First Peoples philosophies, etc.
Yes.
And what I'm really loving is recognizing in that discourse, see sort of like really marginalized ideas in Black and art and literature. Like not the central ideas of the each one teach one, uplift the race, all that respectability stuff, but the marginal ideas of like, oh, we eat mud and we like, you know what I mean, and we like sew handbags out of straw, and we like that very agrarian Black American experience is actually very, very much tethered to like an earthbound, earth-based practice.
Oh, absolutely.
And you are like, I really have always recognized in you this sort of relationship to the South. Like, even
there is a relationship, a deep relationship to the South.
Yeah.
I have a deep relationship. Even the wallpaper in Library of Love is a nod to my father's side of the family, who are Gullah, and you know, is Haint Blue. You know, the white is Haint Blue. You know, so you know, I really wanted to kind of gesture to those people because I didn't grow up with them. You know, like my relationship with the Franklins is very distant. You know, so I can only nod to them through these gestures. You know, these visual art or writing gestures, right? Because my father, you know, he was a typical man. He was disinterested in like that side of his family. He was disinterested also, and probably, right, I mean, let's be honest, like, you know, people want to get away from that life in some ways because it seems country, right? I'm country, right? My people are country, right? Rather than there is a very rich history here, right? I didn't even know, true story, I didn't even know that my grandfather and grandmother were Gullah. They have deep accents, thick. I asked my mother, after my grandmother died, I said, why do they have those accents? It like just dawned on me, you know, like you get older and you're like, all of a sudden you're like, who am I? Who am I? What just happened to me? Like, so I was like, why do they have accents? Where were they from? And she was like, oh, she was cooking. She was so nonchalant, honey. Oh, they were Gullah. I had just seen Daughters of the Dust for the first time. I was like, what are you talking about?
Right? How is this?
She was like,
what
she was like, why? She was like, yeah, I mean, what?
Oh my gosh.
Why don't you know this?
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, wow, you guys are really special. So I had to go through that, you know, I found out about my own people through Julie Dash. So again, right, cinema too, right? I think that both of us have this deep love of like the cinematic, you know, that's also a poetic form to me. You know, cinema is a poetic form to me. And you know, and it influences the way that I move and the way that I see and the way that I imagine the world to be. Right. You know, and I live the majority of my life in my head anyway, so having people, you know, just like characters in my little brain.
Well, that's my next question. Thanks. It's like, actually, it had to do with what you were saying about your father and how interested I always am in the representations of gender in your work. The way you very, very consciously comment and display or interrogate presentations of gender and in particular male and female relationships.
Yeah. Well, you know that. You know, we grew up around the same time. You know, we grew up in the 70s. You know, this is why, and I love the conversations that we're having now, right, about gender and you know, really pushing outside our boundaries. But I grew up with Prince. I grew up with David Bowie. I grew up with Grace Jones. You know, I could go on and on and on. Like, gender non-conforming is not a new idea.
Right.
I used to go to the mall when I was like preteen. Every time I went, they were like, "Hi, sir." It didn't matter what I had on.
Right.
It didn't matter if I had on a dress, a skirt. It didn't matter if I was always sir.
Right.
So after that, I was like, well, you know what? Let me embrace this shit. You know, I want to. You know, my mother told me that the doctor told her that I was a boy when she was pregnant with me.
Really?
And you know, she said she prayed it away. She said she didn't want any boy. She didn't want any boy because she had already had 2 nephews who had arrived before me, and they were terrorists. and I loved them. Of course, they were my first love. I loved them. They were so free. They were feral. They were totally feral. I loved them, and you know, they were just like, you know, my heroes. You know, but I always walked that line between like that, you know, gender line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I always was thinking that men have more power in the world, and so the way that I move through the world is to mimic that power. You know, I was like, oh, okay, y'all powerful? Let me see if I can mock it. See what I can fucking give it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's always like this interplay in my mind around like gender, and I think that does come out in the work.
You know,
But
it comes
also
out with the
because Octavia, and also because of all of these other influences, right?
It does, but also because you're working with printed matter that already exists, you have to take what is being presented to us and then
True.
do something to it.
Something new.
And that's what's interesting to me.
Yeah.
So it'll be this representation of an image, and the male is in the foreground and larger than the woman in the background,
Yes.
but they're both listening to a record, for instance.
Yes.
And you have to do something, you have to create an architecture around that to
Yes.
shift the way that we're looking at that image. And because it's telling us one thing, and then I feel like you do another thing with it. And I think that's really hard, and that's like one of the reasons why I find collage to be really difficult, is because you have to work with the images that
you
this
have.
world
That's your
produces.
yes.
And the images that this world produces kind of routinely diminish
Totally.
and antagonize like whole entire groups of people, right?
Absolutely.
And so how do you take that material and then turn it into something that does the exact opposite, that actually like reveals, enlightens, makes luminous, gives power to the people who are actually intended to be sort of like diminished or trapped or caricaturized.
That's wild that you would say that, because I literally, you reminded me of something, you know, that I think that I just forgot. I mean, I began to make collages to disrupt the fact that I was being programmed by those images.
That's why I started making
Absolutely,
films.
absolutely. I was like, they're programming me. They're programming me with these magazines. You know what I mean? And I was like, I'm gonna use their tools and I'm gonna tear their whole world up.
There's people I work
You know
with.
what I mean? I literally was like, I'm
Exactly why I
gonna
make
take
films.
their things that they're trying to program me with, and I'm gonna flip them on their head.
I thought I could
Yeah.
use film language to make another language that would
Wow.
undo that language.
Wow.
I think I was naive, but I
How
still
old were
tried.
you think when you kind of came up with the idea, the notion of
It was
that?
like I had to take, in freshman year, I had to take a film aesthetics class
Yeah.
as an elective.
Yeah.
And he started talking about wide shot, low angle, high angle, and what those mean. Like it was a grammar, like it was a syntax. I was like, it's a language?
Wow.
And it was like, oh, so you mean every time you shoot like that, you do that on purpose to make the person look small or dumb? Oh.
Mm.
Oh.
Mm.
I was like, oh, it's not the medium itself, it's people doing this with their
Yes.
language.
Yes.
So that's when I like got really interested. So I was like, can something else be done with this?
I love it.
You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you do. Oh.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to, I mean, I don't know what's next in terms of, what's next, who knows what's next, but yeah, definitely it was, a lot of the things that I make are me, and probably for you too, like trying to work through an idea or work through the programming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Trying to undo something that had been done to me, psychically, emotionally, and, disrupt that, tear it apart,
How has it been? Should we open it up to questions? Or
It's over time, I know.
I think we have
Expanding.
5 more minutes.
Okay.
5 more
Yeah.
minutes.
Wow.
Or no, like
Well,
you're
5 more
ready
minutes
for
for us to.
good.
So does it need-
5 more minutes for us to ramble.
Oh, and then we do.
And then we can open it up.
Okay, so
Can I
let-
pose a question? I'm wondering about the voices in each other's work, because Cauleen, I know you've used Krista's actual voice in your work, and Krista, you've pulled a lot of Cauleen into your work too, so I'm wondering
Yeah.
about that exchange of voice and how that, is really presented.
I mean, my whole sort of like cosmology of Chicago depended upon Krista inviting me to a backyard barbecue. Literally my first day here, like I pulled up my car, took my crap out, and then went to Krista's house
Yeah,
down in the hundreds
yeah.
for a barbecue. And that was the beginning of my life in Chicago. So, and I was surrounded by what she has created here, which is like a really profound community of talents that, I don't know, I don't want to sound snarky or anything, but this city sleeps on that talent. And so, but I was way woke when
I was woke anyway. I was a fan. So, already, because, Latasha introduced us via email. She was like, my friend Cauleen is moving to Chicago, and I want you guys to know each other. I was like, Cauleen Smith? Yeah, tell me come over. She's my new best friend.
So how else would I make anything? Like I was really dropped into this world where there are all these like brilliant artists in their own right, that I just wanted to be like, I guess, to play with, to be in conversation with. And then Krista is a performer, as you can see. Yeah, a little bit. And so like the thing about asking Krista to do voiceover is that it's effortless for her, or at least she makes it look that way to me. Where she's like, yeah, come over around 3, and then like we record it, and then it's like it's perfect. You know what I mean? So
I love it. I love doing that work. I love doing that work with you. That is like the best, you know? Also because I don't necessarily have to read my own work.
right,
You know, like I'm like, give me somebody else's stuff to read out loud.
right. But you made things for me for relating to Sun Ra, but that's like our shared love of
Yeah.
that
Sci-fi,
artist, and, like,
yeah.
that was like also a conversation. But
Tavia,
how else would we make things in this city in particular without each other?
we wouldn't.
Right,
We couldn't. Without each other's support,
right.
you know, without each other's games.
Impossible.
And also each other's rigor, you know, like, there can't be enough said for me, you know, for my friends to pull my coattails, you know, because I can be real beside myself. So it's like, I need friends around me who are like challenging me and encouraging me to like level up. You know what I mean? Like, don't stay complacent, don't stay in the same space, mentally, whatever, emotionally, psychically, whatever. Like, I need to have that beloved community of which you are a part, my friends, you know? So, you know, of course I'm gonna be like, yeah, come over. You know, I'm gonna be drinking wine over here all day, so you might as well just come on over and bring that recorder. And I'll
Imagine
just
what this
try to
conversation would be like if we did wine.
Oh my Lord Jesus! I almost took a shot before I came here. Y'all would have been like, it's time to go. Y'all would have been like, we're done. We're gonna leave now. She's doing too much.
I think we would love to open up for questions. I'm sure there are some. So if you have questions, please speak loudly because we don't have a microphone to walk around with.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. You've heard Krista.
Don't be shy.
So, we talk about collaborating with each other, and I often collaborate with one person in particular, who's my husband. But anyway, so sometimes when I'm working on my own in my studio, my own work, I find that sometimes I think, do you ever feel like you're collaborating with yourself, or like with someone, a part of yourself in your brain where your work is coming collaboratively, but it's yours, and you're collaborating with yourself and your other voices inside of your head?
Yes. I am collaborating with the ancestors. I am having a whole collaboration constantly with the people who came before me who are dead. I am basically, in a lot of ways, and I you know, to say this publicly is a little, you know, meh, but I consider myself to be a messenger for them, you know, in some ways. I mean, that's for lack of a better word at this time. You know what I mean? Like, I consider myself to be at their behest. You know, so the things that I am thinking about and creating are oftentimes things that I think that I want to find out from them, and things that they want me to share.
Things they want you to know.
Things that they want me to know, and things that they want other people to know, and they're using me to do it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm constantly in collaboration with the ancestors.
I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a question, but the Black Utopia album is so unappreciated and unknown.
Agreed.
Maybe we could discuss how you did that. And the other thing I want to address is Alton Abraham's importance in the Sun Ra legacy is still hardly known. And people don't want to really mention it, and some people like him, but his family feels that they were kind of cheated out of the legacy. And they want to keep it going. I can
Well,
put you in touch with them.
I mean, I feel like that's a huge part of when I got here.
Yeah,
I was
that was before.
obsessed with, as
Yeah.
you recall, and so I asked Krista to make this. Well, I didn't know you were gonna make this.
Yeah.
When I got this, I was like, this is a whole artwork though. Like, I just wanted, like, I think I asked you to write a
You
poem,
did. You
we
write
were
a
like,
poem.
this is what, and it was like a collage on handmade paper, right? With all these sliced words
Sliced
from
and
John
diced.
Sled's bio.
Mhm.
It was, do you still have that word?
I probably.
Okay.
Did you see
So
it?
I mean, I feel like, I don't know about the politics of the Abraham family, and I'm sad if they feel that way, because I feel like, the materials that, Mr. Abraham left and the legacy of Sunrise just done nothing but like shape, I think, this entire city and its cultures, like multiple cultures, and still does. And what I love about Chicago is like rolling into this town knowing no one. And Sun Ra, those two words were like a key that could open any door in this city. And there's no other city like that, and there's no other artist like that. So that's what I would say.
I mean, I feel like the collage piece with Black Utopia LP had to happen because I was very unfamiliar at that point with Sun Ra and his legacy, you know? And so, you know, some of my ways of like learning is of course book, right? And then like infiltrating those books,
Processing.
right? You know what I mean? Like actually like intervening in those books, right? So it was like, for me, that was my way of like, okay, what story can I tell or retell, you know, because I'm also into like retelling,
Right.
you know, what story can I tell or retell about this figure and his legacy.
And that's what I loved about the story that you gave me, and then the song that Avery R. Young gave me.
Oh my God.
We didn't talk much. You're like, this is, boom, here you go. And I was like, oh, amazing.
Yeah.
It's a story, it's a visual artwork. I'm over it. I'm over myself. And then Avery sang a song in his bathroom and sent it to me over the phone. And both of those songs sort of like reoriented this amazing cosmos that Sun Ra has created and replaced inside of it a kind of feminine presence,
Yeah.
which people have really kind of tried to extract
Erase.
out of it, right?
Mhm.
And I was just so grateful for that. That was like the beginning and the end of that album.
Yeah.
For me, was like this like replacement of this sort of like feminine consciousness, and which was very much a part of the work and his performative persona and everything.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Agreed.
exhibited through June Tyson and the Dancers.
Eminem, so too.
That's
Was like
right.
twirling around in those Eminems.
Yes.
It's like,
Totally.
it's like, I don't believe he was paid, but it was like, this is beyond male and female, it's beyond life and death, it's transforming, transcending, I think is the word. It's like universal humanity. And that's the message. He said he was, what they say, channeling. He said, Creator is sending.
Yeah.
What you just said about the ancestors, I kind of learned it from Sun Ra, that they're alive in another dimension somewhere, and they're communicating with us. When they hear their names taught, spoken of, they may not communicate all the time, but if it's important, they will.
Oh, absolutely.
We were talking about Krista though, so we're gonna keep talking about
Yeah, there
Krista.
was a question in the back.
Yeah. Arden,
Did you have a question?
what's your question, Arden?
It kind of, my question kind of relates to both of the commentaries that have been going. It's my second time seeing the exhibition, and seeing it today, I was just hit with, honestly, like an anxiety about the past, right? And I wondered if that, does that resonate with you at all as like the creator of the work? And maybe there's something about the past, but also a looking toward the future.
Yeah. Oh, that's it. I want to hear more about your
An
anxiety.
anxiety of-
I know. I'm like, what do you mean?
Well, I see
Yeah.
I see it in the work. It's not
That's
just my anxiety. It's like I really see that in the work. I mean,
That's
we are
interesting.
looking at images of many people who've passed.
Yeah.
And also, there's some, I guess, I'm not nostalgia, but I'm seeing images that are older than I am. I'm in
Yeah.
my 50s.
Yeah.
And also people from my lifetime who
Yes.
either aren't here anymore or
Right.
so much we don't recognize them.
Ooh-wee. You know, it's interesting that I love that you call it an anxiety. It is a fixation. I mean, you know, I'm a Cancer, so the past is everything to me. You know what I mean? But I say, like, for me, it is more of like, in my mind, a veneration of the past, or like a preoccupation with what's past. But as far as like life and death, I don't necessarily believe that when people die that they're gone.
You know, I think
You know what I
I
mean?
misspoke. Did I say an anxiety about the past?
Yeah.
I meant to say an anxiety just about time.
Oh, okay.
I have like such a sense about time
Yeah.
in the show. Sorry. I
Yeah, no,
misspoke.
that's fine.
But it was like, is it going too fast or?
It is going too fast.
That's
Yeah, I am anxious about that. I am anxious about that, actually. Yeah, but you know, I am also like playing a lot with the temporal. You know, like past, present, and future is all the same thing to me.
But that's
It's not different.
Isn't that also like one of the challenges of using like popular
Pop culture,
media
absolutely.
images?
Absolutely.
Is that there's so much of
They're
the
locked in their moment.
They're like this ephemera of the time.
Absolutely.
And so they hold it.
They
hold-
do.
Like there's that picture of Tupac, and I'm just like, I can't escape the grief
Yes.
of that moment. of
Absolutely.
losing Tupac. It doesn't
Listen,
matter where
never.
I see that photo or those photos of him.
Never will I
So
let it go.
it's like an interesting, again, it's like really interesting way that using those images really troubles our sense of like the present or the
Yeah.
past.
And memory.
And memory.
And memory, because my memory of him is going to be different from your memory of him. You know, their memory of him. You know what I mean? Like, I'm playing around with all of our memories. I'm like trying to like pull all of our memories in the room through these like locked in, you're right, through time because of the image and where it was taken and what time it was taken. And, you know, it is resonating of that as well as what you carry with it, what you bring in with it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I think we have time for 2 more questions, but I think you had a question over there. Yes.
Okay. To add on to, I wrote a note because I have anxiety. So to
Okay,
add on to
take
the
your time.
question from earlier, you mentioned Octavia Butler's work. How did reading her work help you with your connection to yourself and to your ancestors? And my follow-up question for that is, how did reading her work cause you to feel about your own history and relationship with the earth? I know she mentions how she was like finding out about herself through finding out about her ancestors, and you mentioned that with your
Sure.
mother.
Thank you for that
Questions?
question. No, thanks, Nina. We want to start with that? Oh, Jesus. Okay, so how can I articulate that? I feel like with Octavia's work in particular, she's doing something with definitely with time, because she's like jumping us forward and backward in her writing, you know? And she's forcing us to look at the past to also figure out how we can, as a map, right? How can we learn from what happened before and not continue to replicate it, you know, which is our impulse as human beings, to be hierarchical as human beings, you know? I don't know if she necessarily has connected me with my ancestors as much as she's connected me with like a cosmology that is outside of the norm. You know what I mean? So it's like she makes me think about what would happen if X, Y, and Z. You know, a lot of her books are like a question, right? Like what would happen if the United States goes down the path that it really wants to go down?
It's not even
And
a
here we
question,
are.
it's the answer.
It is literally, she's like, this is what's going to happen. I'm interested
This is
in
what's
that,
gonna happen.
in those inquiries that she's making, I think, you know?
And she's also really not sentimental, which I appreciate.
At all, relentless.
Really cool.
Oh my gosh, she'll kill off a character in a minute. You'll be totally in love. You will be in love with a character, and the next page they are gone. You know what I mean?
Like
You have to reckon with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to reckon with the losses, I think. Maybe that what it is for me too, you know, like reckoning with loss and like how do you recover from loss, and also the choices that we have to make, particularly as Black women. You know, the choices that, you know, she backs her characters into a corner and then tries to see how they're going to come out, swing or not. You know, and the question is, Am I going to adapt to whatever the situation is, or am I going to resist it? And that is always the crux of her novel. So for me, she's taught me how to like think about a problem and decide whether or not I'm going to acquiesce or whether I want to come in swing. You know what I mean?
But that's what I love about her is like, say something like Kindred, where the only way that she can resist is to survive.
Absolutely.
And to make sure the people that she loves survives too.
Absolutely.
That's like,
And making decisions
Carry that
that are
around.
impossible decisions to make. You don't want to make them. You know what I mean? There's no right answer. There is no answer that's right. And I love that she puts us in those spaces when we have to grapple with, you know, circumstances that are out of our control, that we have to decide what is our response to that. And I think that too is kind of an ancestral thing. That's something that I do learn from the ancestors as well. I think it's like the choices that they've had to make, and you know, how did they make them, and how did they survive them? How did they live through those choices after they made them, or you know, in some cases weren't able to make a choice at all. They had no agency.
incomprehensible choices.
Absolutely.
I think that we seem to,
Yeah, I don't know if that answered the
great
question.
conversation to
Because
have.
that's such a those are really great questions.
And we have one more question, Krista, Cauleen, one more?
Yeah.
Yes?
Okay.
So one of my great joys during COVID was watching you guys in Instagram. And, it kept me cheerful and optimistic. And I'm wondering what that has done for your art. Are you making art in the studio and then posting it, or is that like a whole different practice? Like what you're doing for Instagram that might be different, because Krista in particular is so prolific, and then you're always scaring me with your post-its. I'm like, whoa, I was not being smart enough today, but then there's a post-it. But I'm just wondering, is that a whole different thing that you're doing, or are you making the work and then Instagram is just a byproduct of it?
For me, the Instagram is like where I trash talk. I try to be more generative in the actual work I make. It comes to me as a great surprise when things like the COVID trash talking I was doing becomes like a shared conversation. Because I'm just in my backyard pissed and talking trash. and so I really love that form. I mean, I left Chicago and all, like my heart, there's so many people here that I love. And so I need Instagram to keep track of their shenanigans. And that's still how I think of it. And that's really what it's for. And I get lucky sometimes where people are like, you could do something with that. And if I take their advice, it's usually good advice,
Yeah. I am actually very not interested in social media. I hate social media. I would get off of it in a minute if I could, I use it in a very curated way. And I've had people tell me too, like, we don't know anything about you from social media, and I'm like, you're never gonna know anything.
I looked at
Because
yours.
it's not your business.
I looked at yours
You know what I
like
mean?
to prepare for this talk, and it was useless.
It was, it's only there to, it's like a portfolio. You know what I mean? Like, you might get a picture of me maybe, but you'll never know where I was. You'll never, you know what I mean? Like, never gonna know. I don't like being tracked or surveilled. I'm real paranoid. I am. I'm paranoid. I don't like being tracked. I don't like being surveilled. I don't like, people looking at me, really. Unless I'm on a stage. You know what I mean? Unless I'm on a stage. Other than that, I'm like, So like I use social media very sparingly and very, just for certain things. Like even like posting stuff about the show, I'm like, I don't know. You guys can get like 3 pictures. You know what I mean? Go see the show. Go see it yourself.
Can we squeeze in one more question?
Yeah.
Okay. You had a question.
Oh, yes,
Hello.
Hearing y'all talk and seeing y'all interact, the word improvisation comes up for me as both a philosophy but also a kind of methodology or practice. And even in the title of the show, solos, soloing, to listen and to sit back, that kind of intuitive practice to it as well. So I'm wondering curious as to where improvisation as an impulse comes up in your practice, in your work.
I love that question. Ooh-wee. Everything I do is intuitive and improvisational. Every single thing that I do. You know what I mean? Like, I am not a planner. One of my favorite aunts was like, when I was a child, she would make me like write out my like what's your 5-year goals, what's your 3-year goals, what's your 6-month goals. I found it to be so challenging. You know, they're like, what are you gonna do? I'm like, let's see, let's find out. I don't know. I guess it's as good as mine. You know what I mean? Let's find out.
Yeah, but you know what, you say that, and yet the thing is that you practice your crafts, you practice them quite rigorously.
Yeah, I do.
And that's what enables you to be able to improvise.
Well, yeah, because
Like,
you have to be able to
understand.
run your scales
Right.
to be able to improvise,
Yeah,
right?
You do run scales.
I do.
And so that's like, that's what makes that possible. And
Yeah.
maybe even as a little girl, you were running scales, which is why
Totally run
you're
scales.
okay.
And game.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, do you think about improvisation
Oh
in
my
your own
gosh,
work?
all the time, because I mean, I think the thing I like about the creative musicians and what I was always like trying to show up and learn from them is how they do what they do. How do
Absolutely.
you, in real time together, make a composition happen? How are you doing that?
Absolutely.
I wanna do that, I wanna do that with film.
Yep.
And I try all the time and fail miserably because it's a very different medium. But it's like something that I'm really interested in because there's nothing to me more radical than the idea that at any moment, anybody participating can change the entire thrust, direction, vibe, focus, perspective of what you're making together. That anybody and everybody who was there, from the percussionist to the flutist to the person who hits the gong once in the night, they all have the ability to shift the whole game.
Yeah.
That is radical, that is like so important, and it's just something I wanna learn how to do, right?
Love it. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think enough can be said for like improvisation and like intuition. You know, I think intuition is strongly underappreciated. You know what I mean?
Intuition.
Yeah, it's a whole kind of system of intelligence.
Knowledge.
It is. And I think that for us to be pulled away from our intuition is actually not in service to us as human beings. You
It
know?
could be the problem.
It is the problem. You know? One of the problems.
Mm.
There's a few problems. I won't get into that.